Hello, everyone. This is the lecture for our next assignment, which we will talk about subdivision modeling and creating materials. Well, we've created materials before, but playing with materials in a way that is a little more than just adding an image for color. So this week we're going to have a two-part. So part one, this is obviously part one, and then we'll have a part two where we will experiment and play with Substance Painter. But this part, we're going to stay just in Blender for now. So let's get started. So I have Blender open, and um, the purpose of this assignment, like I said, is just to kind of cover subdivision modeling and making materials that are a little more interesting than just, I don't know, adding a texture and colors. So we're going to play with roughness and things like that. So while I was kind of getting the video started in the back of my mind, I was thinking of what to do, and I kind of thought of maybe doing a cupcake. It's pretty simple, and that'll be kind of like what I'll use to demo some stuff, so extra tools and things that you might want to know. So I'm just starting out with a cylinder, and I'm going to make it 12 sides, just because I'm going to be subdividing this, which is going to add significantly to the poly count. So I want to start out relatively low, so I have room to add a bunch of subdivisions to kind of smooth things out, make it look nice and smooth, and kind of round out some of the hard corners, which you'll see. So subdivision modeling is sort of the practice of modeling something kind of lower poly and then using a modifier like subdivision surface to add more geometry. And what that does is it not only kind of rounds and averages the shape, but it also smooths it. But it does exponentially increase the number of polys. So you have to be cognizant of how many polys you're adding to begin with. So if you go too high and you add a bunch of subdivisions, it's going to add up really quickly. Which for a pure, like realistic render, that might not matter. But remember, for this class, we're sort of like in between games and animation, so we want to be a little cognizant of it. Just keep it in the back of your mind. All right, so I have something here. So I'm not gonna like spend too much time making this look really good, just because I don't want the lecture to be too long. But I'm just gonna do model kind of the general shape. So I have kind of the, excuse me for 1 second. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. I record these early in the morning, so sometimes my voice can crack a bit. All right, so modeling a cupcake, and I'm just going to do kind of a simple shape. So we have the basic cupcake shape, I guess, which is what, a cylinder. And then sometimes you'll get sort of the cake part, and I'll just kind of extrude that up, which goes beyond. So I'm thinking the paper, the cupcake, and then the frosting. And let's go to edge mode, add a little edge, and just kind of pull it out a little bit there. And maybe grab this top edge and do a kind of a bevel to kind of round out the top. So I have this kind of shape. And again, I'm just kind of keeping it simple here. This isn't going to be a amazing or photorealistic cupcake by any means, but you got to start somewhere. So I have that part, and I'll just kind of make a general kind of frosting shape. So I'm going to go deselect that, go to add mesh. I guess I could do another cylinder perhaps. That'd probably be fine. So if this was an advanced tutorial, I might be inclined to do something a little fancy. There's some interesting ways that you can make kind of a swirly kind of pattern. Make it look, you know how like when you pipe the frosting, you can kind of twist it, make this cool like spiral kind of shape. I would do that, but I'm just gonna keep it simple because we're still beginners here. So let's just keep it relatively simple. That said, I might do like sort of like a simple kind of frosting. Maybe it's not like, um, like cool fancy spiral, but maybe it'll be a little more like, I don't know, a little more clumpy. Maybe there'll be a couple of like little, what would you call it, layers to it. So that's why I deleted the top so that I could maybe extrude the edge and do something kind of like this. So I'm just tapping E to extrude, and then G and Z to kind of move it up. So maybe like a couple of things like that. And then at the top, extrude again. And so if you tap M, you can collapse. So maybe this will just be the point. I'll just kind of pull it up like that. I'll kind of see how this looks. Looks kind of boring, but that's okay. Maybe if I kind of play with it a little bit, add a couple more, oops, wrong key, add a more couple edge loops in, and scale those up to create something like that. I don't know, it's not horrible. It's not great though, that's fine. Something else when you're modeling, kind of more organic. Well, let's keep it like this, and then we'll go from here. Shade smooth, shade smooth. So here we go. Cupcake model. Now, there's a little more I can do to the shape. So for example, it's actually looks kind of tall for what I would consider. I might actually grab these top vertices and kind of pull those down. And then I might grab the frosting and pull that down. So that looks a little better. Also, the bottom probably should be tapered a little bit. Usually cupcakes have a little tapered bottom to them. But yeah, let's just do that. I was gonna get crazy, but let's just go ahead and do it. Let's just taper the bottom. So what I was gonna say is sometimes I will like UV map it before I do like tapering and tweaking. Just because sometimes it's good just to have it UV mapped kind of like ready to go. But so I'll like UV map it here and then I'll play with the shape. But there's a lot I'm gonna do to this, or I might want to, so I'm not gonna quite do that yet. But that is something. So let's pull the bottom in a little bit, get a better shape. And it's looking pretty good. Let's grab this bottom vertex, or I mean edge, and bevel it a little bit so it's a little rounder. That also helps with the shading, so we don't get that harsh shading. So that looks pretty good. I don't like how the frosting looks at all. I think it's too like, I don't know. Sorry about that. Let's go to, yeah, so when you select vertice groups, you want to make sure you're selecting all of them. So sometimes I go into X-ray mode, which the shortcut is Alt-Z. And that'll let you select your vertices from all sides. I could probably tweak that forever, but let's just kind of move on. All right, hold on, one more thing. Let me just add one more. Okay, let's do it this way then. Let's grab this edge and bevel, but let's only bevel it once. And then let's use this resulting edge to create a better tip, or tip. I don't know, it sounds weird. Like a better like end to the frosting, whatever. All right, so I do want to create the paper that has the nice grooves in it. So I'm going to just kind of select around here. So Alt, select that. And actually, let's do it this way. Select the bottom, then do Control plus plus plus, and that'll sort of select what it's connected to. Let's go one more. So let's go all the way. Let's do the paper kind of up to, well, you know what? It'll probably look better if it's more like that, because the paper is more straight and the cake part will sort of kind of comes out above it a little bit. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to do Shift D to duplicate. That's going to duplicate it. And I'm going to scale it up. Here's a trick. If you hold Alt and scale, hold Alt and scale, it does a kind of inflate function rather than pure scaling. So it kind of will balloon out rather than scale up and increase in size, if that makes sense. So it helps, it's helpful for making this kind of like stay sort of in the same spot, but then just kind of inflate out the paper part. And it will look better that way. And then I'm just going to grab the paper by tapping L to select the element, and then P, that'll separate it into its own selection here. All right, so here's where the subdivision modeling comes in. So I want to create some nice grooves around it. And in order to do that, I have to have more geometry because obviously I have these big chunky polys, which isn't going to give me the detail I need. So I'm going to select the paper, which is now its own separate model. And I'm going to do subdivision surface. And then I will do 2. And it's going to give me 2 subdivisions for viewport, which is, I'm in the viewport here, I'm not rendering. So what that means is it takes the polys and it divides them like a cross. So it'll divide them vertically, horizontally. Excuse me. If your model is mostly quads or 4-sided, you get a nice even subdivision. If it's not, it kind of does this weird pattern that sort of turns it into a 4-sided, which I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to do that to give myself some more geometry. And then now I have to, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I have to scale it up a little bit, but it's kind of scaling it not the way I like it. So I'm going to go into the polygon mode and do the alt scale on the polygons to kind of inflate them so that they are bigger. Oh, it's really finicky. There we go. I want them to be bigger than the cupcake itself, or it's so it actually looks like it's around the cupcake, right? Okay, so after this, when you're doing it, when you have the modifier on, you still have the original low poly underneath it. I don't really need it for what I'm doing here. So I actually want to apply this modifier, and that will give me my polys I need. So yeah, if you look at the bottom, this is what I'm talking about. When you don't have quads, you get these weird like star patterns, which is probably fine. We'll worry about this later. If this does bother you, you could, get rid of some of it, I guess. Dissolve, but it's fine. It's the bottom. We're going to kind of leave it. So from here, I'm just going to pinch in some of the sides. So I'm just going to go to a view and just grab some of these edges, not some of them, every other edge, because I'm going to pull them. I'm either going to pull them in or pop them out. I guess whatever ends up looking the best. And so I'm just going around and just holding Alt and Shift. And Alt and Shift is allowing me to select each like edge loop as I go. Not that bad. It does go all the way around the model, as you can see. I definitely don't want that. Usually like these will start to kind of fade out toward the bottom. So I'm gonna go to X-ray mode, go to vertex mode, and then just hold Control and come up and maybe deselect them around that much. Go back to edge mode, turn off X-ray. Actually, let's go 1. Let's do Control, but then let's get like, I think I did to there. Let's go to here. Oh, I'm not in X-ray mode. Make sure you're in X-ray mode, or else it'll leave the back ones selected. All right, that looks better. So go back here, or any view you want, and then do Alt, Scale, and I don't have a lot of room to come in, so maybe I'll come out like that. That looks pretty good. It does have this kind of weird, so at the bottom it does like kind of weird how it's like that. So I might just grab these edge loops and maybe scale those in a tiny bit so they don't look so pretty good. Overall, it's kind of let's see. Let's go to actually, you know what? I'm gonna undo that because let's do it. Let's keep it like that. Let's grab everything and kind of scale it all in um, first. Okay, and let's grab the top. So you can just kind of, or I would just sort of come through and kind of scale each one in a little bit um, to get it a little better. And for the bottom, I might. So time wise, we're getting a little long, so I might kind of fix this and then move on and just sort of keep it in its sort of imperfected state and then tweak it a little later. But just grab those vertices that are sticking out, and those I do want to pull them in a little bit so that the, I guess you would say, ruffled edge is a little not so much. So that looks a little better. So we got the nice ruffled edge of the paper, and we got the cupcake and the frosting. So just a really simple kind of food item. Some other kind of modeling stuff you could do is, so here, if you turn on proportional editing, which is this button, the shortcut is O, you can select a vertice and move it, and you get this kind of like area of influence, which you can use your mouse wheel to edit. And you can use it to make some organic edits where it sort of influences, you know, vertices around. So if I were to grab like these four and kind of move them, so it's good for like organic modeling. So for like the frosting maybe, or if, I mean, you're probably not doing a cupcake, but whatever you end up doing, if you have any organicness to it, sometimes using like the proportional edit can be kind of a good way to make it look a little more natural and not so sort of like drafted. So sometimes when you're 3D modeling and you're using like primitives and edge loops, you get this like really mechanical draft look to it. So things like this are good to add a little organic noise to make it look a little more natural, which is always good to do. So we did that. Also, if you want to add kind of like a subdivision to this, so go back to object mode, subdivision surface. So that already kind of makes that look a little more organic, as you can see. Kind of smooths everything out, which looks nice. And then same thing for the cupcake itself, subdivision. So I'm just going to do one. So one thing, actually, so I did the cupcake, and it looks a little, it makes it look a little rigid, actually. I don't like how it looks. So let's edit the cupcake. And I'm going to go to edge mode. So you can see you can sort of model underneath. Oop, I don't want the proportion editing. I'll turn that off. You can model underneath the modifier, which is handy because you could sort of keep the low poly, and you could see how it's being influenced by the modifier. Do I even need this edge? This edge here. So when you're doing subdivision modeling, when you make edges closer to each other, it creates kind of like a crease. So you can see when I pull this edge, add another edge here, and I pull them close, it creates like a crease, which I don't want. So I'm just going to dissolve this edge and see if I get a better result. And I kind of do. I kind of like this better. I'm just going to like move it up Maybe move it like that. So I'm kind of moving the low poly and it's kind of fitting to the, so you can see kind of like how it takes the low and kind of averages it out. This is a really simple example of that. I know some of you have experimented. I'm gonna make this a little bigger as well. I know some of you have experimented with this already, so this might be a little bit basic for you. But for those of you who haven't, definitely try it, and you can come out with some nice kind of organic looking models. Yeah, so it's looking pretty good, I guess. So right, the paper is a little, it looks like it's coming off a little too much, which I might fix. I do also think it should taper a little more. Let's see if we can get a taper going. Let's grab the bottom and scale it in. Let's see if we can get to taper a little better. There we go. So it looks like we accidentally scaled it in. I'm gonna add I'm gonna add a material to this really quick and go here. And the reason I'm adding the red is because I want to be able to see if I scale parts of it out. I don't want it to kind of come through the paper, which it looks like it sort of is a little bit. Go back here. Anyway, I could tweak this all day, which I don't really want to do. Looks pretty good. So I would probably fix this a little more. Maybe you could add another, let me add another subdivision and see like how bad it looks. It might get a little crazy here. No, it doesn't look bad at all. If you add one little subdivision to there, it looks actually pretty decent. It's not crazy polygon wise. It's a little high. If I were to make this for a game, it would definitely be too high for a game. I'd want to come here and strip some of this out. But for what we're doing, it's probably fine. I do want this to be, maybe if I add an edge loop to kind of like hold the shape a little better, I could extrude this out. So it kind of meets, the paper a little better. That's not so far away. Like there's not so much of a gap. All right, so we definitely got to move on. So let me just, so just be careful when you're using these subdivisions that you're not going crazy. Apply them, look at the wireframe and just kind of look at the wireframe, make sure it's not too out of control. Like I said, this is a little intense. So I might actually come in here and hold Shift and Alt and kind of select every other, especially at the bottom, select some of these edge loops at the bottom and X and dissolve. So I don't really need them. And they kind of add a lot to it. You can do it on the bottom too. Actually, I can fix the bottom later, but you might want to do that if it gets a little too intense. You can do that. Cake is low, frosting's good. Okay. So now there it is. And for here, maybe you want to do some materials. I do want you all to practice working with a single object. So let's just select everything and Control J, and that will join them. So now it's one object. One thing with Control J to remember is the last object you select, the light orange, that's like the object of focus. And then when you join them, it'll adopt the pivot point of that one. And so here you can just make some materials. Just play with the settings a little bit here. So we're going to play with, I'm going to go to this view here. This is viewport shading, which gives you some shading detail. If you click on the settings, you can adjust. This is sort of like the world which gives you like some ambient lighting and some reflections that you can play with if you want to. You can also add a light if you want to add your own. So we're not going to get too crazy into lighting. That's for another lecture, but maybe I might want to add just like a sun and go to viewport shading options, turn on scene lights. So that give me the light from the sun. Maybe you could take the strength down a little bit. Since I do have a light, I can take this down a little bit. The strength, not all the way down, but you can just play with these settings if you want to. And again, this isn't a lighting lesson. This is just enough where you can play with materials, right? So I have my object. I'm gonna make a couple materials. I'll do 3. And this one will be frosting. And this one, I'll click new. This will be cake. And this one will be paper. So when we do Substance Painter for part 2, we're going to do this a little different. All right. This is just for visual, just playing visually with the material settings. So just remember that. All right. There's a lot of different ways to do this. So I'm going to just select the polys for the cake with L and then click assign and then the paper and then click assign. So now everything's in a sort of a different material. So for the cake, I'm going to change it a different color, like a kind of yellow, saturation down a little bit, kind of give it something closer to what it might actually look like. I don't know. What does cupcake cake look like? What color? I don't even know what color it is. Look at reference and figure it out. I'm thinking kind of like that, I guess, if you're doing like a vanilla. Anyway, figure it out. So here, if I select one of the materials, like frosting, for example, I have the base color, and you can have, choose a color of, whatever kind of frosting you might like. And then if you go down to roughness, roughness is a setting that we're going to play. We're not going to mess with all of these. So some of the more ubiquitous settings for PBR, physically based rendering, which is what we're going to focus on, is base color, which is the color, the roughness, which is how shiny or rough your surface is, which affects how reflective it is, metallic, and then maybe some other ones down here later. So now do some roughness here. So if I take the roughness down, maybe so frosting does have a little bit of sheen to it, something like that. Looks like a lot actually. Maybe a little bit. It has it's made of like butter and sugar, so it has a little bit of fat on it, which gives it some gloss. The cake part probably doesn't have as much, so we're going to increase the roughness. So if you want something to appear not reflective, you increase the roughness. And if you want something to be reflective, you decrease the roughness. So just think of like rough surfaces like concrete, wood, rubber tend not to be reflective unless if they have a coat on them. And then surfaces like, glass, chrome, metal, car paint, things like that are really smooth and reflective. And you can also bring an image in here, but you have to UV map it first. I'm not UV mapping because we just for time's sake. But yeah, this is part 1, playing with modeling, playing with the material, different kinds of materials that you might have on your model. Also try to do things that have different like surface qualities, like the cake might be less shiny, whereas the frosting might be shiny. Let's just make a really quick let's do like 6, let's do like 12. Hold on a second, move this over. I probably should have let's see, let's grab a couple of these edges. I don't need all these. And then dissolve. One second. I'm just gonna make a really, really quick cherry. That's what I'm doing. So let's kind of pull that in. I don't know what cherries look like. Make sure you're getting reference when you do this. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head, which isn't the best thing to do. But I'm sort of trying to be quick about it. So any one trick though is anytime you do something sort of natural, it's always good to add some kind of like I did with the frosting, some kind of chaos or entropy to it, so it doesn't look like a sort of machine manufactured cherry. All right, so let's pretend this is a cherry. Let's shade it smooth. Let's add one subdivision to it. It's low poly, so we can do just one. It's gonna be small, so we don't want to go too crazy. And shrink it. Stick it in somewhere over here. Shrink, move, rotate, rotate, rotate. All right, this cherry is just kind of sitting here, and the stem has been taken off. I don't want to model the stem, sorry. And then let's make a material for this. I'll just call this cherry, just to kind of show you. So you could have a nice red color. And let's see, decrease, make it a little darker. Saturation, pretty good. Let's make it pretty shiny. So you see the difference in material. That's kind of the difference in materials is kind of what I'm thinking for this to play with. And in part 2, we're going to actually UV map our model, bring it into Substance Painter, and even create more interesting variation with color. And we're going to do bump patterns, so you can do some nice bump on the cake part and stuff like that. But just start here and see how far you can go, and then we'll continue in the next.